Have you ever trusted someone completely, only to be met with devastating betrayal? On his wedding anniversary, self-made billionaire Ronan Walsh receives an anonymous email containing undeniable proof. His wife, Naomi, has been unfaithful with Oliver Hayes. Surveillance footage shows her entering a hotel. Suspicious transactions appear in her bank account. When Ronan confronts her, Naomi offers no defense. She simply walks away, taking their 1-year-old son with her. By morning, she has vanished. No trace, no contact. But the most devastating truth? She was never the one pulling the strings. What secrets await Ronan? And when the truth finally comes to light, will it be too late to make things right? Follow this gripping story to find out. The gas stove clicked off, leaving behind a sharp, hollow tick in the silence of the room. Naomi stood still for a moment, her gaze fixed on the 2 carefully plated meals on the table. Steak, cooked to perfection, bathed in a rich green peppercorn sauce, buttery mashed potatoes melting at the edges. Everything had been prepared with meticulous care, like a ritual. The candle on the dinner table had already burned a third of the way down, wax dripping onto the tablecloth, hardening into frozen rivulets, like time itself had stopped. The pristine white plate across from her remained untouched. The crystal wine glass beside it sat empty. Naomi glanced at the clock on the wall, 9:17 p.m. She picked up her phone, tapping the screen. No messages, no missed calls. Ronan's silence was crueler than a rejection. Opening her messages, she typed quickly, "Are you coming home soon?" A brief hesitation. The words were simple, no accusations, no resentment. Just a question. She stared at the screen, willing it to light up with a response. But after a few moments, she sighed, setting the phone down. She turned away. In the mirror by the corner, a woman stared back at her. A woman draped in a sleek black silk dress, her long hair cascading over one shoulder. Naomi reached up, adjusting the delicate strap resting against her skin, smoothing down the fabric. Ronan had given her this dress on their anniversary last year, back when they still laughed together, when his hand still reached for hers without hesitation. She tried to remember the last time he had truly looked at her, not the fleeting glances before he left for work, not the weary, indifferent gazes exchanged at social events, but the last time he had really looked at her, as if she was the only woman in his world. She couldn't recall. A dull ache rose in her chest, but she smothered it before it could grow. On the table, her phone remained silent. Naomi stepped out of the kitchen and into the living room, where their wedding photos still hung neatly on the wall. One of them captured the moment they exchanged rings, Ronan's eyes shining with the certainty of a man who believed the world was his to hold. She reached out, her fingertips brushing against the cool glass of the frame. A faint breeze drifted through the slightly open curtains, making the golden glow of the table lamp flicker, like a memory slipping through time. They had been happy once. A soft rattle echoed from the front door as a draft swept through the hallway outside. Naomi's heart skipped. She turned, breath caught. But no, not Ronan, just the wind. She sank onto the couch, tilting her head back against the cushions, staring at the ceiling. She was used to waiting. Reaching for the bottle of red wine she had picked out that morning, Naomi uncorked it. A Bordeaux, the one Ronan once said was perfect for a special night. She poured a small amount into her glass, swirling it gently, listening to the delicate sound of wine lapping against crystal like a whispered lullaby. She raised the glass, watching the city lights refract through its deep crimson hue. She didn't have to wait. She could drink alone. And yet, a part of her still held onto the fragile hope that Ronan would walk through the door before the last candle burned out. Naomi picked up her phone again. Still nothing. She stared at the screen for a long moment before slowly setting it down. This time, she didn't check it again. Lifting the glass to her lips, she took a slow sip. The wine was smooth, velvety, but the taste no longer held the warmth it once did. She closed her eyes, inhaling deeply. Beyond the window, the city pulsed with life, cars speeding down the streets, people moving through their own stories, their own nights, in thousands of apartments just like this one. But here, in the stillness of her own home, Naomi was left with only one thing: silence. The last candle flickered once, then went out. Naomi placed her glass on the table, stood up, and reached for her ring. Slipping it off, she set it down beside the untouched plate across from her. No words, no tears. She turned off the lights, letting darkness swallow the room, save for the silver glow of the moon filtering through the curtains, casting pale light over the cold, empty table. Then, she walked away. 10:27 p.m. Ronan leaned back into the leather chair of his high-rise office at Callaway Tech, his eyes fixed on the glowing screen before him. Revenue reports, stock fluctuations, and endless streams of data flickered beneath the cold blue light. Beyond the glass walls, New York City pulsed with life, skyscrapers glittering against the dark, the endless stream of headlights weaving through the streets like veins pumping through the heart of the city. A world that never slept. His fingers flipped through the pages of a contract, but his mind drifted elsewhere. It wasn't that the numbers in front of him weren't important. They were. They were the proof of years of sacrifice, the foundation of an empire he had built from the ground up. They were the reason he sat here now, in the penthouse office of a building that bore his name, a successful man, a respected leader. And yet, it didn't make him feel whole. His gaze flickered toward the edge of his desk, where a single framed photograph rested. A moment frozen in time. Naomi smiling under the morning sun, cradling a tiny Leo in her arms. A quiet moment, a distant memory. Ronan reached out, fingertips brushing against the frame. But then, his phone vibrated against the desk. The screen lit up. "Naomi, are you coming home soon?" His heart stalled for a beat. He stared at the message. Just one simple question. No accusations. No anger. A part of him wanted to pick up his phone and reply, "I'm on my way," or, at the very least, "I'm sorry, I got caught up at work." But he didn't. Instead, his thumb hovered over the screen for a second before pressing the power button. The display faded to black, leaving him alone once more with the harsh glow of his computer. Ronan inhaled deeply, then turned back to the cold, indifferent figures in front of him. Outside, the night deepened. The wind rattled softly against the thick glass panes. Inside, the rhythmic tapping of keys echoed as Ronan reviewed a new contract with a European tech firm. Work. It was the only thing that kept him from thinking about what he didn't want to face. The emptiness. For all his success, for all he had built, there were nights like this when the silence felt unbearable. A knock at the door. "Come in." The door opened, and Oliver Hayes stepped inside, his most trusted associate, and the man in the photos with Naomi. Ronan looked up, his gaze sharp as a blade. "You're here late," he said, his voice low, unreadable. Oliver shut the door behind him and strode to the desk, placing a folder down. "Internal audit report. Thought you'd want to go over it before the board sees it." Ronan nodded, but didn't reach for the folder. Instead, he leaned back, arms crossed, eyes never leaving Oliver. "That's so." His voice was slow, deliberate. "Or is there something else you wanted to say to me?" Oliver's expression remained composed, though his brows knit together slightly. "Ronan, about Naomi, don't." Ronan's voice was steel. "I don't want to hear her name from you." A heavy silence settled between them. Oliver stood his ground, lips pressing into a thin line, as if weighing his words. Finally, he exhaled. "Suit yourself." With that, he turned and walked out. The door clicked shut behind him, and Ronan was alone again. This time, when his phone vibrated, he didn't even glance at it. He told himself there were more important things to do, but the silence in the room told him otherwise. 11:07 p.m. A soft classical symphony played in the vast expanse of the penthouse suite. The delicate notes of Debussy's Clair de Lune drifted through the air, weaving an elegance that was both haunting and cold. From the 52nd floor of Sterling Enterprises, the city lights of New York spilled through the floor-to-ceiling windows, turning skyscrapers into golden streaks against the dark night. Below, the endless flow of traffic twisted and turned like veins pulsing through the city's body, never stopping, never resting. In the middle of the spacious room, Amelia Sterling reclined in a black Italian leather armchair, slowly swirling a glass of red wine in one hand, her gaze fixed on a laptop screen before her. On the screen, a digital article with a bold headline: Ronan Calloway and Naomi Calloway, the power couple of the tech industry. The featured image captured Ronan and Naomi at a gala last year. Naomi, in a navy blue evening gown, stood close to Ronan, her smile radiant. His eyes, on that night, held nothing but absolute pride for his wife. Amelia took a slow sip of wine, tilting her head slightly. The corner of her lips curled, not quite in amusement, not quite in disdain. Naomi Calloway, the woman who had stolen what should have been hers. A soft vibration interrupted the silence. The phone on the table lit up, casting a faint glow onto the glass of wine. Unknown number. Everything is ready. He'll receive the email now. Amelia set down her glass, scrolling her mouse. Next to the article about the perfect couple was another image. Naomi stepping out of an upscale hotel, Oliver Hayes following closely behind. One snap of her fingers and everything could change. The inbox on her screen showed a freshly sent email. The subject line was brief, almost clinical. Your perfect wife is betraying you. A single click, an action as simple as sending a routine business document. But Amelia knew, within minutes, Ronan Calloway's entire marriage would begin to crumble. She tilted her head slightly, her eyes gleaming with anticipation as she imagined the moment Ronan opened that email. The way he would freeze in place, breath hitching, heart constricting in his chest as betrayal seeped into his veins. The confrontation, the anger, the devastation, a slow, quiet satisfaction unfurled inside her. Amelia opened a file within an encrypted folder. A series of images and documents appeared on the screen. Fabricated bank transactions, money transfer between Naomi's and Oliver's accounts, accompanied by vague, suggestive notes. Meticulously edited photographs. Naomi entering the hotel, Oliver following a second later, but the timestamps have been altered. Fake text messages. A thread of intimate conversations between Naomi and Oliver, carefully crafted through deepfake technology. Amelia leaned back in her chair, fingers gliding over the keyboard. There was no need to rush. Everything had been orchestrated step by step, flawlessly, just like how she ran Sterling Enterprises. Because Amelia Sterling did not make mistakes. She reached for her phone, scrolled through her contacts, and sent a brief text. I'm so sorry to hear about this, Ronan. You don't deserve to be betrayed like this. A simple move, but an effective one. All it took was planting the tiniest seed of doubt, a whisper of sympathy, a gentle nudge toward the inevitable. Then everything else would collapse on its own, like a row of dominoes. She set the phone down, picked up her wine, swirling the deep ruby liquid once more. Moving her cursor, she hovered over a folder labeled Naomi Calloway, clicking it open. Inside lay an extensive dossier, phone records, emails, travel logs, months of careful observation. She had been watching this woman for a long time, and now every piece was falling into place. Once more, she pulled up the article about the power couple, her eyes lingering on Naomi's radiant smile. Slowly, deliberately, she dragged her cursor to the corner of the screen and clicked on the trash icon. One click, the only trace of the deception vanished, as if it had never existed. Amelia leaned back, her cold gaze drifting toward the window. The night wind brushed against the glass, but she felt nothing, because in this game, she was the one in control. 11:32 p.m. The hallways of Calloway Tech were eerily silent. The employees had long gone home, leaving only a few dim lights casting a soft glow onto the polished wooden floors. Ronan's footsteps echoed as he walked toward the elevator, a heavy briefcase in his grip. He was exhausted, too exhausted. A full day buried in meetings, negotiations, and endless numbers had left his mind sluggish, weighed down like lead. And yet, none of that was as suffocating as the feeling he was trying to ignore. The elevator doors slid open. He stepped inside, leaning against the glass panel, closing his eyes for a brief moment. He thought of Naomi. She had texted him. He hadn't replied. He would be home late. She was probably asleep by now. He told himself he would talk to her in the morning, hold her, pretend there was no distance between them. But he didn't know that in just a few seconds, his entire world was about to change forever. A soft vibration from his suit pocket. New email. Ronan pulled out his phone, his eyes skimming over the subject line displayed on the screen. Your perfect wife is betraying you. A sharp chill ran down his spine. His brows furrowed. Spam? A sick joke? But when his gaze landed on the attached files, his fingers froze above the screen. The first image, Naomi stepping into the Grand Del Mar, an upscale hotel he knew all too well. The second image, Oliver Hayes, his most trusted associate, following closely behind her. The third image, Naomi and Oliver entering the same room, the door shutting behind them. Ronan felt his blood turn to ice. Under any other circumstance, if he had seen these pictures in some tabloid, he would have scoffed and dismissed them without a second thought. But this email wasn't from a tabloid. It was sent directly to him. He scrolled down. Another attachment, a bank statement. A string of numbers blurred in his vision. $3,000 transferred from Naomi Calloway to Oliver Hayes. $5,500, another transaction. $10,000, personal consulting services. Ronan went rigid. The numbers swam before his eyes. Oliver didn't need Naomi's money. His salary at Callaway Tech was astronomical. His personal assets more than secure. So why? The elevator doors slid open, but Ronan didn't move. He stood frozen, the world tilting on its axis. He tried to rationalize it, to reason with himself. Maybe the photos were misleading. Maybe the transactions were innocent. Maybe there was an explanation. But then a voice in the back of his mind whispered, cold, quiet, merciless. If there was a logical explanation, why has she never mentioned any of this? She never told him about meeting Oliver alone. She never mentioned the money. She never. Could she have? A soft ding broke the silence. A message from Amelia Sterling. I'm so sorry to hear about this, Ronan. You don't deserve to be betrayed like this. His grip on the phone tightened, his knuckles turning stark white. Amelia? How did she know? Why was she messaging him now? His rational mind urged him to breathe, to think, to wait. But his emotions were already spiraling. Wild, reckless, uncontrollable. The email, the images, the money. Oliver, Naomi. A storm raged inside him. His steps were heavy, determined, as he strode out of the elevator, heading straight for the parking garage. Each footfall slammed against the cold marble floors with unrelenting force. His hands curled into fists. He needed to hear her say it. He needed to face her. Sliding into the driver's seat, he started the engine, pressing the gas pedal hard. Tires screeched against the pavement, the sound slicing through the night. He was going home, to Naomi, to the truth. 11:46 p.m. Ronan's anger didn't erupt all at once. It seeped in, like fire threading through his veins, creeping into his muscles, coiling around his breath. The car sped through the streets of New York, heading toward the Callaway estate. The engine growled under the pressure of his foot, streetlights flickering past the windshield, casting fractured light over his tense features. His grip on the steering wheel tightened, knuckles turning white. He could hear his own heartbeat, loud, uneven, erratic. But this wasn't the pain of a betrayed man, not the blind rage of someone who had just discovered his wife's infidelity. This was something else, the struggle of a man grasping for reason, for explanation, for anything that would keep him from believing what he had just seen. And then his phone buzzed. A message. Amelia Sterling. I'm so sorry to hear about this, Ronan. You don't deserve this betrayal. The fire ignited. Ronan slammed on the brakes. The car jerked to a stop in the middle of the road, tires screeching against asphalt, the sharp scent of burnt rubber filling the air. His eyes locked onto the screen, breath heavy. Amelia. How the hell did she know? His fingers curled around the phone, jaw tightening. He wanted to believe Amelia was simply offering comfort, a longtime colleague, a trusted friend in the tech industry. But he knew her too well. Amelia never did anything without a reason. Each word in that message burned into his mind, igniting a storm of suspicion. Why now? Why was she sorry? Why did she know? Before he had even spoken a word, a thought flickered across his mind. Too quick to grasp, but just enough to leave a mark. Ronan swallowed hard, swiping through his message history with Amelia. The last text from her, a work-related update from last week. Nothing out of the ordinary. Before that, a congratulatory note when Callaway Tech announced its latest project. Nothing unusual, but then a memory surfaced. 3 weeks ago, a meeting. Amelia had mentioned, so casually, that she'd seen Naomi leaving an event with Oliver. At the time, Ronan hadn't thought much of it. But now, the pieces were starting to align. The phone sat heavy in his grip, screen glowing dimly in the dark. Ronan typed quickly, "How do you know about this?" He didn't want to call. He wanted her to lie first. Because if she lied, if she hesitated, then something was very, very wrong. The typing bubble appeared. Seconds stretched into eternity. Then the reply came. "I heard some rumors, but I wasn't sure. When I saw you didn't go home tonight, I thought you should know." Lies. A cold shiver ran down Ronan's spine. No one just happened to know a secret like this. No one could guess the perfect moment to send a message like this. No one, except someone who had planned it all along. His breath slowed, heart pounding so hard he could hear it echoing in his chest. He wasn't sure of anything anymore. But for the first time in the last 20 minutes, a part of him started to doubt what he had seen. 11:56 p.m. Ronan clenched his jaw, shut off his phone, and restarted the engine. The anger was still there, but it was no longer just about Naomi. Now it was something else, something deeper, something far more dangerous. He needed answers, and only one person could give them to him right now. He pressed his foot to the gas. The car tore through the night. Destination, home, and Naomi. 11:20 p.m., Callaway Estate. The Aston Martin DB11 tore through the iron gates of the Callaway Estate, its tires screeching against the gravel, leaving a harsh trail in its wake. The engine growled before Ronan slammed the brakes, the car jerking to an abrupt stop at the foot of the grand staircase. The porch lights were still on. She was still awake. Ronan stepped out, slamming the car door hard enough to send a sharp echo rippling through the quiet garden. The November night air was crisp, but he barely felt it. The fury boiling inside him burned hotter than any cold. His fingers tightened around his phone as he strode toward the front door. He didn't bother ringing the bell. This was his house. He unlocked the door and walked in. Naomi was in the living room, standing just a few steps away. She had just poured herself a cup of chamomile tea, wisps of steam curling in the air. Dressed in a soft cream-colored sweater, her hair loosely tied at the nape of her neck, she looked as serene as ever. Not like a woman caught in the middle of an affair. But Ronan didn't trust what he saw anymore. He only trusted what he knew. Naomi turned at the sound of the door slamming shut. For a split second, surprise flickered across her face as she took in the sight of him standing there. His expression dark, his gaze like a brewing storm. "Ronan." He didn't answer. Instead, he marched to the coffee table, threw his phone down onto the glass surface, the screen still lit. A photo of Naomi and Oliver entering a hotel. She looked down and froze. Ronan's jaw clenched as he tossed a thick stack of documents onto the table. Bank statements, transaction records. "Do you have anything to say?" His voice was hoarse, every word laced with restrained fury. Naomi blinked, her gaze trailing over the scattered pages. The cold, indifferent numbers reflected in her deep brown eyes. "What is this?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "This is evidence," Ronan said, his lips curling into a bitter smile. "Evidence that while I was breaking my back building this empire for you, you were—" He couldn't even finish the sentence. The words lodged in his throat like jagged glass. Naomi slowly picked up one of the statements, her eyes scanning the transactions. One name appeared over and over, Oliver Hayes. Her breath hitched. "What the hell is this?" Her voice sharpened as she looked up, genuine confusion flashing across her face. "Ronan, you think—" "I don't think," he cut her off, his tone like ice. "I know." He pushed the phone closer to her. "And this?" His voice was lethal. "You and Oliver. At a hotel. Are you going to deny it?" Naomi's gaze remained locked on the screen, her expression shifting, her eyes flickering between her own face and the man standing behind her. Oliver, don't pretend you don't know. For the first time, her eyes snapped to his sharp, unwavering. You think a few photos are enough to judge me? Ronan let out a low, humorless laugh. I'm not judging, he said. I'm just putting the pieces together. Naomi's shoulders tensed as she exhaled slowly. So that's the first thing you assumed when you saw these? She murmured, her voice no longer angry, just tired. Ronan's fists clenched at his sides. What did you expect me to think, Naomi? His voice was rough, strained. That it was just a coincidence? That you and Oliver happened to be at the same hotel at the same time? That you wired him thousands of dollars, but it was all some kind of misunderstanding? A heavy silence settled between them. Not a word, just the weight of doubt. A betrayal, a something breaking between them. Naomi inhaled shakily, as if trying to hold herself together. She stepped closer to the table, her fingers grazing the edge of a framed wedding photo, the one Ronan used to love. A moment frozen in time, their faces alight with joy, caught in the glow of a promise that now felt like a lifetime ago. She looked up at him, her voice barely a whisper. Do you really believe I could betray you? The words hit him like a fist to the chest. Something inside him cracked. But the anger was louder. He stepped forward, grabbing the frame from her hands, and hurled it to the ground. Shatter. Glass exploded across the hardwood floor. Naomi flinched, her hands trembling at her sides. Not because she was afraid of him, but because she had never seen him like this. Ronan sucked in a sharp breath, trying to steady himself. But all he felt was the acrid taste of bitterness in his throat. He couldn't do this. He couldn't stand here, looking into her eyes, not knowing if he could still trust her. He turned away. Ronan, Naomi's voice cracked. He stopped at the doorway, his back to her. I can't do this right now, Naomi. His voice was quiet. Hello. Then he walked out. The door clicked shut behind him, leaving Naomi alone, in a room filled with nothing but silence and shattered glass. The air in the living room felt frozen in time. Shattered glass lay scattered across the dark wooden floor, catching the overhead light and reflecting it in sharp, fractured glints. Naomi stood barefoot against the cold surface, staring at the broken pieces of their wedding photo, the fragments as small and jagged as her own heart. Her breath trembled. She waited for him to turn back, waited for him to say something, waited for a sign, any sign, that he didn't truly believe the accusations. But Ronan never turned back. She heard the distant slam of a car door, then the low hum of an engine starting. He was gone. The emptiness that followed was suffocating. It felt as if the entire house had been drained of air, leaving nothing but a heavy, crushing silence. Naomi closed her eyes, and finally, the tears fell, hot and unchecked, streaking down her face. She wiped them away quickly, as if unwilling to witness her own weakness. A soft cry echoed from the bedroom. Leo. Naomi turned sharply, her feet moving before she could think. She pushed open the door and found Leo twisting in his crib, his tiny face flushed, his small hands reaching out for warmth. Her heart clenched. Scooping him into her arms, she held him close, inhaling the faint scent of milk lingering in his soft hair. Leo whimpered against her shoulder, his hiccuped sobs stabbing in her chest like 1,000 tiny knives. Chill. I'm here, baby. I'm right here. Her voice wavered. She looked down at the little boy in her arms. She couldn't let him grow up in a home filled with doubt and pain. Naomi tightened her hold on her son, her decision settling in her bones. She was leaving. Tonight. She turned and hurried to the master bedroom, pulling out a suitcase. Clothes, folded neatly, though her hands trembled as she zipped the duffel shut. A few personal belongings. Documents. Baby formula. She packed with frantic urgency, not allowing herself time to hesitate. She didn't think too much. She only knew one thing. She couldn't stay. Not another second. Pausing at the vanity, she slipped off her wedding ring and placed it on the cool surface of the dresser. The dim light glinted off the white gold, but the band was nothing more than a hollow, lifeless thing now. As Naomi stepped through the living room again, her gaze landed on the shattered wedding photo. The glass shards remained on the floor, just like their love, broken beyond repair. She moved faster. At the front door, a gust of icy wind struck her as soon as she stepped outside. She shivered, pulling her collar up, shielding Leo from the cold. There was no one on the porch, no one stopping her. Ronan wasn't here. He had left, and now so was she. Naomi stepped down the stairs, her heels pressing into the gravel driveway. Each step felt heavier than the last, but she didn't stop. Pulling out her phone, she dialed for cab. A familiar voice answered on the other end. "Hello, this is Yellow Cab." Naomi swallowed hard, forcing her voice to stay steady. "I need a car." Immediately, she gave the address, slipped the phone into her pocket, and waited. Minutes later, headlights swept across the driveway, stretching her shadow long against the pavement. She didn't turn around. The taxi door swung open. She cradled Leo tighter, then slid into the back seat. The driver glanced at her through the rearview mirror. Where to, miss? Naomi parted her lips, but no answer came right away. Where? She didn't know. She only knew she couldn't stay. She inhaled, her voice quiet but resolute. "Just take me away from here." The door shut. The taxi pulled away, leaving the Callaway estate behind. Raindrops began to fall, scattering across the windshield, blurring the distant house into nothing more than a silhouette. Naomi didn't look back. She had made her choice. The taxi sped through the night, leaving the Callaway estate, and everything Naomi once called home, behind. She held Leo close, gripping him as if loosening her hold even slightly would send the entire world crashing down around her. He had fallen asleep, his tiny breasts warm against her ice-cold skin, but his little body still trembled with the aftershocks of his sobs. Naomi leaned her forehead against the rain-streaked window, her vision blurring. She had no more tears left to cry, yet the pain kept rising, flooding her veins like a slow, merciless tide. She had nothing. No husband, no home, no place to go, where to, miss? The deep, gravelly voice of the driver startled her. Such a simple question, and yet the answer lodged in her throat, impossible to say. Where? There was no place waiting for her. "Anywhere," she whispered, "as long as no one can find me." The taxi rolled on through the misty rain. By morning, Naomi stood before the cracked mirror of a cheap motel room on the outskirts of the city. The room was small and lifeless, a single, stiff bed, a rickety table by the window, a cramped bathroom. It was nothing like the mansion she had left behind, but at least it gave her one thing she so desperately needed, an escape. Leo was still asleep, his tiny hands curled tightly around the blanket as if afraid someone would take it from him. Naomi gently brushed a stray lock of hair from his forehead, pressing a soft kiss to his warm skin. No matter what happened, no matter how cruel the world outside became, she had to protect him. A sudden ringing shattered the silence. The motel phone. Naomi's breath caught in her throat. Her entire body went rigid. No one knew she was here. No one should have been able to find her. A hesitant knock at the door made her flinch. The elderly woman who managed the motel peeked inside. "Miss Callaway, there's a call for you." Every muscle in Naomi's body tensed. She turned to the phone on the table, its shrill ring echoing like a warning. Her fingers hovered over the receiver. A part of her wanted to ignore it, to pretend it wasn't happening. But another part, the weak, desperate part, wondered, was it Ronan? Had he realized his mistake? Was he searching for her, trying to bring her home? Slowly, she lifted the phone to her ear, taking a deep breath. "Hello." Silence. A long, suffocating pause. Then, a man's voice, low and chilling, cut through the static like a blade to her skin. "How long do you think you can run?" A cold shiver raced down Naomi's spine. Without thinking, she slammed the phone down, as if holding on for even a second longer would allow invisible hands to reach through the receiver and strangle her. Her pulse pounded, wild and erratic, but she couldn't afford to panic. She had known this would happen. From the moment she stepped into that taxi last night, she had known she couldn't simply disappear without a trace. And the worst part was, she still didn't know who was behind it all. Her gaze flickered to the old motel television. She hadn't turned it on, but the news anchor's voice blared loud enough to pull her from her spiraling thoughts. Breaking news. Naomi Calloway, the perfect wife of Ronan Calloway, accused of having an affair with her husband's most trusted associate. Images flashed across the screen. Naomi stepping into the hotel with Oliver. Bank statements riddled with suspicious transactions. Sensationalized headlines, stacking one after another. Tech queen or homewrecker. Scandal shakes the billionaire elite. Ronan Calloway, betrayed by the woman he trusted most? She couldn't breathe. The accusations were too precise, too seamless, as if someone had carefully orchestrated every detail, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. A storm she could never outrun. Naomi clenched her fists. She couldn't sit here and wait for them to come for her. She had to disappear, for real this time. She stepped into the tiny bathroom, staring at her reflection under the flickering fluorescent light. A pale, exhausted woman stared back. But somewhere beneath the fear, a flicker of something stronger burned. Determination. Her gaze dropped to her hair, dark, shoulder-length waves. She remembered Ronan's voice, soft in her memory. "I love your hair. Never cut it." Naomi grasped a handful of strands, then reached for the scissors. The cold metal pressed against her fingers. She took a breath and cut. The first lock of hair fell into the sink. Then another, and another. She kept going, hacking away at the past, stripping away the woman she used to be. By the time she stopped, her reflection was unrecognizable. This wasn't Naomi Calloway anymore. She was no one. A fugitive. A ghost. Taking a steadying breath, she swept away the fallen strands, wiping her face clean. It was time to disappear. Naomi Calloway was dead. From this moment on, she would become someone else. Someone no one could ever find. The sky was beginning to brighten, but for Naomi, the sun no longer brought light. She kept her head low, trembling fingers pulling the collar of her coat higher, shielding a face that now felt like the world's most wanted. The biting winter wind sliced against her skin, seeping through the thin fabric, but she didn't bother drawing her coat tighter. Standing at the edge of a narrow street, she watched the endless flow of cars, the hurried footsteps of people rushing into their day, none of them noticing her. Just a stranger, a woman with unevenly cut hair, clutching a sleeping child in her arms. Leo stirred slightly against her chest, his warm little body a stark contrast to the cold seeping into her bones. But Naomi remained frozen, her eyes locked on a television screen across the street, displayed in the window of an electronics store. Her face stared back at her from the morning news broadcast, right next to Ronan and Oliver Hayes. A relentless stream of headlines ran across the screen like a verdict already passed. Scandal shakes the tech world. Ronan Calloway's wife caught in affair with trusted partner. New evidence proves Naomi Calloway's betrayal spanned months. She's gone. What is Naomi Calloway hiding? Naomi's breath hitched. A dizzying sensation swept over her, making the world tilt slightly. There was no turning back now. She had been pushed to the edge, and somewhere, someone was watching, enjoying every moment of this downfall with cruel satisfaction. Miles away, in a towering glass-walled skyscraper, Amelia Sterling lifted a glass of red wine to her lips, taking a slow, deliberate sip. Her reflection shimmered against the window, merging with the cityscape beyond, like she was gazing down at the world from a throne built high above it all. On the sleek monitor before her, news articles flooded in, updating by the second. Scandal, analysis, speculation, a media firestorm, one she had orchestrated to perfection. And Naomi Calloway, the woman who once had it all, was now nothing more than a disgraced name. A smirk curved Amelia's lips. Easier than expected, a soft vibration on the desk caught her attention. Her phone screen lit up with a new message. Ronan Calloway, thank you for telling me. The smirk deepened. She tapped a manicured fingernail against the rim of her glass, the soft clink echoing through the silent room. Thank you. Did he truly think she had done this to help him? How naive. Amelia had never cared about Naomi. Not once. Destroying her was never the goal. Owning Ronan was. He had pushed Naomi away himself. He had chosen to believe the worst. He had walked right into the space she had carved out for him. And that was the most exquisite part. Amelia had never needed to force his hand. She had simply fed him just enough information, just enough for him to fill in the gaps with his own doubts, his own fears. That was the true art of manipulation. Plant the seed and watch it spread like a virus. And now that Naomi was gone, Ronan would spiral into isolation until there was only one person left standing beside him. Her. Amelia set down her glass, reclining against the leather chair, utterly satisfied. A knock at the door. She didn't turn, merely exhaled lazily. "Come in." The door opened, and her assistant stepped in, a folder in hand. "Callaway Tech's press conference is underway," the assistant reported. "Ronan still hasn't made an official statement." Amelia scoffed. "Of course, he hasn't," she mused, twirling her phone in her hand. "He won't. Not yet. He's still drowning in his own betrayal." She rose from her seat, walking toward the glass, the entire city sprawling beneath her feet. "Now," she murmured, her gaze razor-sharp, "all I have to do is wait. Wait for Ronan to stumble. Wait for him to break beneath the weight of the chaos she had unleashed. Wait for the moment he realized that when the world turned against him, the only one left beside him was Amelia Sterling." She smirked, settling back in her chair, lifting her wine glass once more. Her eyes never left the screen, where Ronan's name still lingered in his last message. She typed out a single reply, "I'm always here, Ronan," then set the phone down, her smile deep with satisfaction. Naomi has lost everything. Ronan is drowning in doubt, and Amelia is victorious. But what is the real truth? As the pieces begin to fall into place, who will be the one standing in the end? Don't look away. What comes next is a dangerous game of truth and deception, where one wrong move could bring everything crashing down. Do you believe Naomi will find a way to prove her innocence? Or will Ronan remain trapped in the fury of the lies Amelia has spun? Keep watching. Part 2. The trial begins. In the high-rise office of Sterling Enterprises, Amelia Sterling set her wine glass down on the desk, her eyes fixed on her phone screen. Ronan's message was still there, simple, yet heavy with meaning. "Thank you for telling me." She tilted her head slightly, her fingers grazing the screen before she finally set the phone aside. The game was already in motion, and Ronan had just stepped onto the board. But Naomi was still out there. Amelia clicked on a file on her computer, pulling up a series of scandalous images that had just been released. Naomi Callaway, once the embodiment of grace, the perfect wife in a flawless family, was now nothing more than a name splashed across headlines, stamped with one damning label: traitor. She could run, but she would never escape. Downtown, a morning in chaos. Naomi ran. She pushed through the crowded streets, weaving between cars, her breath coming in sharp gasps. Her legs burned, screaming at her to stop, but she couldn't, she wouldn't. In her arms, Leo sobbed, his little face flushed red with fear. Behind her, footsteps thundered in pursuit. Cameras flashed. Voices overlapped, forming a relentless storm around her. "Naomi, do you have a statement? Did you really cheat on Ronan with Oliver Hayes? Why are you running? Do you have anything to say to Ronan Callaway?" She tightened her hold on Leo, pressing him closer, as if letting go for even a second would mean losing him forever. No, she wouldn't let that happen. Her foot slipped slightly on the pavement, but she gritted her teeth and lunged toward a narrow alley. Her breath was ragged, sweat slick on her skin despite the cold air. She had to find cover. Another flash, another camera clicking behind her. Naomi darted into the passage between two aging buildings, where the sunlight barely reached. Her footsteps echoed on damp concrete as she pressed herself against the brick wall, heart hammering in her chest. Leo was still crying, his sobs broken and frightened. She cupped the back of his head, resting her forehead against his, whispering softly, "Chill. It's okay, baby. I'm here." The stench of rotting garbage curled in the air, but she barely noticed. She just needed a moment, just 1 minute to steady herself. But the silence didn't last. Her phone buzzed in her coat pocket. Naomi stiffened. Slowly, she pulled it out. An unknown number flashed on the screen. She didn't want to answer, but something deep inside told her she had to. She pressed accept. Before she could speak, a voice, low, gravelly, ice cold, slipped through the line. "Did you really think you could run forever?" Naomi froze. Her grip tightened around the phone, her lips parting slightly, but no words came out. "Stay quiet if you want your son to be safe." No overt threats, no raised voice, but the meaning was crystal clear. A soft click, the line went dead. Naomi stood motionless in the dim alley, the words reverberating in her mind. "Stay quiet if you want your son to be safe." She hugged Leo close, squeezing her eyes shut, forcing herself to breathe. This wasn't just about ruining her name. Someone wanted to destroy her completely. She couldn't stay here. She couldn't let them find her. Naomi opened her eyes, something shifting within them. No more being the victim. No more being the hunted. She would fight. Pulling her coat tighter around Leo, she stepped out of the shadows, blending into the moving crowd. No one would find her. No one would touch her son. Naomi Calloway would not be defeated. Naomi pulled her coat tighter around herself, quickening her pace along the crowded sidewalk. Her breath was still unsteady from the terrifying phone call, but she couldn't let fear consume her. She clutched Leo close, blending into the throng of people, trying to disappear among 100 unfamiliar faces. Everything had changed. This was no longer just a scandal or a media frenzy. This was a real threat. Someone wanted her silent, and that was the one thing she couldn't allow. As she wove through the mass of strangers, the flashing TV screens outside shop windows continued to replay the same images. Her, Ronan, the scandal raging like an uncontrollable wildfire. Somewhere else, in stark contrast, Ronan Calloway stood in the suffocating silence of an empty house. The Calloway estate had never felt this cold, this hollow. Even on the latest of nights, the house had always carried traces of life. The soft sound of Naomi moving through the kitchen, the light laughter of Leo as she lulled him to sleep, the quiet hum of a TV left running in the living room. But tonight there was nothing, just silence. Ronan stood outside Leo's bedroom door, his hand resting on the handle, but not turning it just yet. He had stood here countless times before, but never with this unbearable weight pressing down on him. Finally, he pushed the door open. The room remained exactly as it had been before Naomi and Leo left. The crib still sat in the corner, surrounded by Leo's favorite toys. The orange stuffed tiger Ronan had bought him when he was just 6 months old. The tiny toy car Naomi had once said Leo refused to sleep without. Now they sat untouched, lifeless. There were no small hands reaching for the stuffed tiger anymore. No sweet, babbling voice filling the space. Leo wasn't here, and neither was Naomi. A foreign tightness gripped Ronan's chest. He stepped inside, his feet moving on their own until he found himself standing by the crib. Looking down, he noticed Leo's blanket, still neatly folded, as if Naomi had known they wouldn't be coming back. Reaching out, he picked it up, his fingers tightening around the soft fabric. A faint trace of Leo's scent still lingered on it. For the first time in hours, his anger wasn't enough to drown everything else out. All that remained was emptiness. Ronan sank onto the edge of Leo's small bed, burying his face in his hands. He couldn't sleep. He couldn't stop seeing those images. Naomi and Oliver. A hotel room. Money. The evidence was undeniable. And yet, why? Why? When she had looked at him with those wounded eyes, had he felt hesitation? Why? When she hadn't defended herself, hadn't explained, had simply left in silence. Why had it felt like something inside him was shattering? He didn't know. He couldn't make sense of it. All he knew was that this house had lost its breath, and he couldn't bear this silence any longer. Ronan stood, stepping out of the room. But just as he did, the phone on the nightstand lit up. A missed call from Oliver Hayes. His jaw clenched. The screen flashed again. Oliver. Ronan's grip tightened. He didn't want to hear anything that man had to say. He didn't need an explanation. He didn't need more reasons. Naomi had left. She had made that choice, and now he would make his. Reaching out, he turned off the phone. His footsteps echoed through the long hallway as he walked away, leaving behind a house emptier than it had ever been. The Calloway estate was swallowed in darkness, the only light seeping in from the street lamps outside. Shadows stretched across the ceiling, distorted streaks of solitude cast through the glass windows. Ronan lay on the living room sofa, one arm draped across his forehead, eyes shut tight, but his mind refused to be still. He had tried to sleep, tried to lose himself in the suffocating silence of the night, hoping that by morning, the anger would fade and the emptiness inside him would begin to dissolve. But it didn't. It only sank deeper. This house was becoming more foreign to him by the second. No more soft footsteps of Naomi moving through the kitchen. No more gentle murmurs as she lulled Leo to sleep. No more mornings where his son climbed onto the bed, tugging at his hand to wake him. All that was left was an unbearable quiet. His phone buzzed on the glass table. He didn't need to check the screen to know who it was. Oliver Hayes. Again, he let it ring. The glow of the screen pulsed in the darkness, each vibration breaking the silence with a hollow, mechanical hum. Missed call. Oliver Hayes, 6. New message from Oliver. Ronan, listen to me. Something isn't right. Missed call. Oliver Hayes, 789. Ronan opened his eyes, glancing at the phone. His fingers curled into a fist, his palm burning with the kind of heat that came from barely restrained rage. He didn't want to hear it. Didn't want to hear the voice of the man he once called his best friend, the man Naomi had betrayed him with. What was there left to say? Oliver was a liar. Naomi was a traitor. He had already made his decision. There was nothing more to hear. The phone buzzed again. Missed call. Oliver Hayes, 10. Ronan exhaled sharply, reaching for the device, ready to turn it off. But just as he swiped at the screen, another message appeared. Oliver, you don't understand, Ronan. You're making a huge mistake. Ronan's brows furrowed. A mistake? No. The only mistake he had made was not seeing the truth sooner. The only mistake was loving Naomi too much. With one final motion, he silenced the phone and powered it off. There was nothing left to say. Across the city, in a dimly lit apartment, Oliver Hayes threw his phone onto the table, frustration boiling in his veins. 10 calls, a dozen messages, and Ronan still wouldn't listen. Oliver understood. He knew Ronan was furious. He knew that trying to reason with him now was like pouring gasoline onto an open flame. But he couldn't just stand by and watch this unfold. Something wasn't right. He hadn't slept with Naomi. Not once. So those photos, where had they come from? There was only one person who could have orchestrated this. Oliver clenched his fists, his jaw tightening as realization settled in. Amelia Sterling. Early morning. Ronan didn't know when he had drifted off. The living room was still dark, save for the faint, dull glow of the overcast sky filtering through the glass windows. His shirt, crumpled from the night before, hung loosely on his frame, top buttons undone. A dull, relentless ache pounded in his skull from lack of sleep. The silence was suffocating. He reached for his phone on the table, thumbs swiping across the screen. 12 missed calls from Oliver. A few unread messages. And a news notification. Naomi Calloway, a betrayer or a wronged mother. Ronan frowned. He didn't want to read it, but somehow his fingers moved on their own, opening the article. Naomi Calloway, a betrayer or a wronged mother. New York Gazette by Julia Carter. Yesterday, the world witnessed one of the biggest scandals in the tech industry when Naomi Calloway, wife of billionaire Ronan Calloway, was accused of having an affair with her husband's trusted associate, Oliver Hayes. Evidence of her betrayal surfaced quickly, shattering the image of the perfect wife the public once admired. But amid the storm of outrage, one question remains unanswered. If she was truly guilty, why did she disappear like a fugitive? And if she was innocent, why hasn't she defended herself? An anonymous source claims that Naomi Calloway didn't just leave her home that night. She took her son with her. 1-year-old Leo Calloway is now missing alongside his mother. At this moment, no one knows where they are. So, is this the escape of a guilty woman? Or is Naomi truly a mother protecting her child from something far worse? Another strange coincidence. Callaway Tech has made no official statement regarding the scandal. No press release, no interviews, no response to the growing speculation. Could this mean that Ronan Callaway himself is starting to doubt? And the final question, who provided this evidence in the first place? Who actually stands to gain from Naomi Callaway's downfall? Ronan's grip on the phone tightened. Every word in that article sliced through the walls he had built around his heart. He wanted to dismiss it, wanted to believe it was just another sensationalized piece designed to manipulate and sell headlines. But there was one thing he couldn't ignore. From the moment this all began, Naomi hadn't spoken a single word. He remembered her face that night. Not pleading, not angry. Just pain. No, he couldn't let himself waver. The photos, the bank transactions, the emails. The truth was undeniable. He couldn't let some foolish article make him forget that. And yet, if Naomi had truly betrayed him, why would she take Leo without a word? Why not explain? Why not fight back? The question repeated over and over, no matter how much he tried to silence it. Ronan exhaled sharply, setting the phone down. His fingers pressed against his temple. Don't think about it, Ronan. Don't. But at that moment, one line from the article echoed in his mind, digging into his nerves like a knife. Who provided this evidence in the first place? Ronan set his phone down on the table, his mind a storm of thoughts after the article he had just read. He didn't want to believe it, didn't want to admit that he might have been wrong. But the questions kept circling in his head, stuck on repeat like a broken record, impossible to silence. If Naomi really betrayed me, why did she run as if she were the victim? Why hasn't she said a word? Why did she take Leo with her? He inhaled sharply, his hands curling into fists. No, he couldn't let himself waver over a single article. The things he saw that night were still seared into his memory. Naomi walking into a hotel with Oliver, the suspicious bank transactions in her account, the whispers from Amelia. It was all real. He was sure of it. And yet, a thought crept into his mind, fragile as a thread, but tightening around his consciousness like a noose. If I'm so sure, then why does something still feel wrong? Ronan moved toward his desk. Everything from last night was still scattered across the surface. The glow of his laptop screen, the mess of documents, and among them, the printed email that had accused Naomi. He pulled out his chair, sat down, and let his fingers glide over the keyboard, opening the folder of old files. He had built his entire life on technology. He could break down a data system in hours, analyze hundreds of pages of business reports without missing a single discrepancy. And yet that night, he had looked at this evidence like an enraged husband, not like a man who had spent years making cold, calculated decisions. He reopened the file on the bank statements, scrolled through the transactions. A large sum transferred from Naomi's account to Oliver's. But then his eyes froze on the timestamp. 10:13 p.m. Ronan stilled. He remembered clearly. At 10:15 p.m., he had received a message from Naomi. "Are you coming home soon?" Which meant she had texted him just 2 minutes after wiring a suspicious $10,000 transaction. He didn't know much about affairs, but no woman cheating on her husband would be that reckless. His frown deepened as he pulled up the screenshots of the transactions, cross-checking them against Naomi's messages. The unease inside him sharpened. He switched to the photo folder. The image of Naomi walking into the hotel with Oliver. The first piece of evidence that had shattered his trust. He stared at it. Something was off. Until now, he had only looked at what the image showed. Naomi's face, Oliver's presence, the hotel entrance behind them. But this time, he focused on the details. The wall clock reflected faintly in the hotel's glass doors. Ronan zoomed in, his pulse pounding as he read the numbers on the clock face. 8:37 p.m. But in the email, the timestamp on the photo had said 10:30 p.m. A 2-hour gap erased from reality. A chill ran down his spine. He leaned back in his chair, pressing a hand over his mouth, his palm burning hot. Something was very, very wrong. He looked at the evidence again, this time with the eyes of a man who had spent years understanding how data could be manipulated, altered, forged. Someone had played him. Someone had constructed a story, laid out every piece perfectly, making sure he wouldn't question it before leading him to the wrong conclusion. Someone had wanted him to believe Naomi was guilty. Someone had manipulated him. And now, only one question remained. Who was behind all of this? Ronan closed his eyes. One name surfaced in his mind instantly. Amelia Sterling. Ronan closed his eyes, inhaling deeply, but the air felt trapped in his lungs. The chill still crawled down his spine. I was played. He wasn't a fool. He had spent his entire life running a billion-dollar empire, cutting ruthless deals, seeing through the lies of some of the most deceitful people in the industry. And yet, this time, he had been manipulated. He wanted to believe he was right, wanted to believe Naomi had betrayed him, wanted to believe his rage was justified. But the truth was unraveling, and now he needed answers. There was only one person who could give them to him. Ronan stormed out of the estate, not caring that his shirt was still unbuttoned, not caring that his shoes were muddied from the damp ground beneath his hurried steps. He pressed the gas pedal harder than necessary, the roar of the engine slicing through the empty streets. City lights streaked across his windshield, flickering against the dashboard. But in his mind, there was only one name. Oliver Hayes. If anyone else was involved in this mess, it was him. 15 minutes later, his car screeched to a halt in front of Oliver's upscale apartment. Ronan stepped out, slamming the door shut behind him. The night air was sharp against his skin, but it wasn't enough to cool the heat burning in his chest. He didn't knock. He pounded on the door. Inside, hurried footsteps shuffled closer. Within seconds, the door swung open. Oliver stood there, clad in an old t-shirt and sweatpants, his face etched with exhaustion and shock. He looked like he hadn't slept all night. Ronan, there was no time for pointless questions. Ronan shoved past him, stepping inside. Oliver stumbled back, but didn't resist. What the hell? What did you do, Oliver? Ronan's voice was low, lethal. Oliver blinked, confused. Don't fucking pretend. Ronan roared. I saw everything. The photos, the bank transactions, you and Naomi at the hotel. Did you really think I wouldn't figure it out? Oliver froze. I didn't do anything, Ronan. I swear to God. The words came fast, steady, without hesitation. A thick silence settled between them. Ronan stared at Oliver, searching for the flicker of a lie, waiting for the telltale signs of guilt. But there was nothing. No avoidance. No panic. Nothing but undeniable sincerity. And that was the moment Ronan felt something shift. Oliver shook his head, his eyes dark with anger. You think I betrayed you? He let out a dry, humorless laugh. You think someone who built Callaway Tech with you from the ground up, someone who has had your back for years, would sleep with your wife? Ronan didn't answer, because for the first time since this nightmare started, he wasn't sure anymore. Oliver clenched his jaw, stepping forward, shoving Ronan back with both hands. Say it. Do you really believe that? Ronan's mouth pressed into a tight line. He wanted to believe it. Wanted to believe Oliver was guilty. Wanted to believe Naomi was a liar. Because if he did, if he held onto that anger, he would have to face the far more terrifying truth that he had made a devastating mistake. Oliver's voice dropped, his expression darkening. Someone is trying to destroy you and Naomi. His words were slow, deliberate. And if you don't wake up now, you're going to lose everything. A wave of cold washed over Ronan. He said nothing, because deep down, he knew Oliver was right. Someone had orchestrated all of this. Silence filled Oliver's apartment. Ronan stood motionless, Oliver's words still echoing in his mind. Someone is trying to tear you and Naomi apart. And if you don't wake up, you're going to lose everything. His instincts had never been wrong. The inconsistencies in the evidence, the perfectly orchestrated deception, there was only one explanation. Someone had set him up, and if there was anyone with the power to do it, only one name came to mind. Amelia Sterling. But instinct wasn't enough. He needed proof. The drive back to the estate was a blur. The cold wind rushed through the open window, but it did nothing to calm the storm raging inside him. He needed answers. Now, without hesitation, Ronan pulled out his phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in months. The line rang once, Twice. 3 times. Then a low, sharp voice answered on the other end. "I thought you forgot about me, Calloway." 30 minutes later, Kane's safe house. Ronan stepped into a small apartment tucked behind an aging building in Brooklyn. It was nothing remarkable, just a worn-down living space with sparse furniture, dim lighting casting long shadows. But beyond the office door ahead, one of the most dangerous minds in the tech world was waiting for him. Kane. No one knew his real name. A genius coder, a hacker who could break into any system he wanted. Kane had once worked for Calloway Tech in its early years, but his reckless nature and questionable associations had forced Ronan to cut ties with him. Still, if there was anyone who could unravel this mess, it was Kane. The hacker sat before a wall of glowing monitors, a cigarette lazily burning between his fingers. The reflection of streaming code flickered against his glasses as he glanced at Ronan and smirked. "So, you want me to clean up your wife's reputation?" Ronan clenched his jaw. "No, I want to know who sent the email that destroyed her." Kane raised an eyebrow. "Sensitive data like that? And you're letting me dig around in it? Damn, Calloway, how desperate are you?" Ronan had no patience for games. He tossed a USB drive onto the desk, the same one containing everything he had once believed to be true. "Just do it." 20 minutes later, Kane's fingers flew across the keyboard, rapid and precise. The screen flashed with lines of encrypted code, files unraveling like threads in a web. Ronan stood behind him, arms crossed, heart pounding with every passing second. This was it. The USB held everything, the emails, the financial records, the photos. If any part of it had been tampered with, Kane would find it. The monitor flickered. A new command line appeared. Tracing email origin. The air in the room grew heavier. Kane's eyes narrowed as he scrolled through a series of encrypted data points. 1 minute, 2, 3. Then, he chuckled. A slow, cold laugh filled with amusement. Well, would you look at that?" Ronan stepped forward. "What?" Kane swiveled his chair to face him, a sharp gleam in his eyes. "Take a guess. Where do you think the email was sent from?" Ronan didn't answer. Kane leaned in slightly, his voice dropping to a razor-sharp edge. "Sterling Corporation." The words landed like a punch to the gut. Even though he had suspected it, seeing the truth in cold, hard data made the ground beneath him shift. Amelia Sterling. She had orchestrated everything. The final pieces of the puzzle snapped into place. Ronan's fists clenched, nails digging into his palms. Kane exhaled a thin stream of smoke, watching him carefully. "So, Calloway, what do you want me to do now?" He tilted his head. "Leak this to the press? Wipe out Sterling servers? I could ruin her entire company before sunrise." Ronan took a slow, deep breath. He could do it. He could end this right now. Tear Amelia down the way she had tried to destroy him and Naomi. But not yet. Not like this. He needed to do this right. To take her down completely, at the perfect moment. And more than anything, he needed to fix what he had broken with Naomi. Ronan met Kane's gaze, his voice ice cold. "No." His lips curled into a deadly smirk. "Hold on to everything. I'll end her myself." Ronan stepped out of Kane's apartment, the cold glow of the streetlights casting sharp shadows across his face. The USB drive sat heavy in his palm, small, yet weighted like the entire world was pressing down on it. He slammed the car door shut, turned the ignition, but didn't drive off immediately. Everything had become painfully clear. He had been manipulated, controlled, dragged into a war that was never his to begin with. Naomi had been destroyed, his wife, the woman he had once vowed to protect, and the mastermind behind it all, Amelia Sterling. A deep, simmering fury settled in Ronan's chest. Not the reckless, blind rage he had felt before. No, this was something colder, sharper, the kind of anger that came from knowing exactly how the game was played and preparing to strike back. He wouldn't make another mistake. But there was one thing he didn't know. Amelia was already ahead of him, and she wasn't the kind of woman to sit back and wait for her downfall. Sterling Corporation, 52nd floor, executive office. Inside the towering headquarters of Sterling Enterprises, the atmosphere was the complete opposite of the quiet, sleeping city outside. Floor-to-ceiling glass walls reflected the dazzling skyline, but within the sleek office, the only illumination came from glowing computer monitors and the tense voices of executives in a late-night meeting. Amelia Sterling stood at the head of the room, swirling a glass of red wine in her hand. Her sharp gaze flicked over the reports displayed on the screen, dissecting every detail with a predator's patience. Her assistant, a polished yet visibly uneasy man, cleared his throat, holding up a financial dossier. Callaway Tech hasn't issued an official response to the scandal. But we have a problem. Amelia didn't turn. Her voice remained calm. What problem? The assistant hesitated. Ronan Callaway hired someone to trace the source of the email that exposed Naomi. We have reason to believe that he's going to trace it back to me. Amelia cut in smoothly, setting her glass down. The assistant didn't answer, but she already knew. A slow, knowing smile curved on her lips. She had anticipated this. Ronan wasn't a fool. She knew that. He had believed her because she had given him exactly what he needed, a reason. A justification to unleash his anger, to abandon Naomi without guilt. But now, with cracks forming in the perfect illusion, Ronan wouldn't stop until he uncovered the truth. That was fine. She had planned for this, too. If Ronan wanted to fight, she would make sure he was too busy to even think about Naomi. "Give me Jonathan West," she said, voice smooth as glass, naming a journalist feared in the corporate world. "I want an article in the Financial Tribune first thing in the morning." Her assistant barely blinked. And the narrative? Amelia lifted her wine glass again, eyes gleaming. "We'll say Callaway Tech is under investigation for financial fraud." The next morning, the news breaks. The first article surfaced at 7 a.m. It wasn't some cheap tabloid rumor. The Financial Tribune, a respected business journal, published the story first. Then came the New York Business Journal, then Forbes, then CNBC. Within an hour, the headlines were everywhere. The Callaway Tech scandal isn't over. Company now accused of financial fraud in investment deals. Callaway Tech shareholders in panic amid allegations. Callaway Corporation facing federal investigation. Ronan stood in his office, multiple screens flashing with the breaking news. His phone rang nonstop. Investors, legal teams, board members demanding answers. His jaw clenched. He had been preparing for a war with Amelia, but he hadn't expected her to strike this fast. She didn't just want to destroy Naomi. She wanted to take him down, too. Callaway Tech headquarters, CEO's office. Ronan clenched his phone, his grip tightening as he scanned the explosive headlines flashing across the screen. Callaway Tech faces financial fraud allegations. Stocks plummet. The scandal isn't over. Is a federal investigation looming over Ronan Callaway? The walls of his office felt like they were closing in. Phones ringing nonstop. Messages from board members flooding in. Shareholders demanding an explanation. A perfectly executed media storm. Amelia hadn't just gone after his reputation. She was coming for his entire empire. She wanted to take everything from him. Ronan exhaled slowly, forcing the rage boiling inside him into something colder, sharper. He wouldn't let that happen. He would fight. But just as he steeled himself for war, his phone buzzed again. Not a lawyer, not an investor. A name he never expected to see. Naomi. St. Andrew's Hospital. Naomi almost collapsed when the doctor said it. "Your son needs an urgent blood transfusion." Her breath caught. "What do you mean?" The doctor, a man in his 50s with graying hair and a face etched with years of experience, watched her with both urgency and sympathy. "He's had a persistent fever for 2 days, but now his condition has worsened. He's showing signs of acute anemia." Acute anemia. Naomi's mind went blank. Leo had been running a fever, but she thought it was just something minor. She had stayed up every night, pressing cool cloths to his forehead, holding him close, whispering to him that he would be okay. But she had been wrong. She had been so damn wrong. The doctor's voice cut through the panic flooding her chest. "We need to do a transfusion immediately, but your son has a rare blood type, AB negative." Naomi nodded rapidly, desperation clawing at her throat. "Then I'll do it. Take my blood. Whatever it takes." The doctor sighed. "We already ran your blood work. You're not a match." We need to find a compatible donor as soon as possible. The strength drained from Naomi's body. She couldn't save her son, but there was someone who could. Her hands shook as she reached for her phone. She hadn't called this number in over a year. She had sworn to herself she never would again. But now, she had no other choice. Naomi never thought she would call Ronan. Not after everything that had happened. Not after everything he had done to her. But as she stood in the hospital corridor, gripping her phone so tightly her knuckles turned white, she knew she had no other choice. There was only one person who could save Leo. Only one call that could decide her son's fate. She couldn't hesitate. She wasn't allowed to hesitate. But then why were her hands shaking like this? The screen lit up, displaying a name she had tried so desperately to forget. Ronan Calloway. Her heart pounded against her ribs. 1 year. It had been 1 year since she last heard his voice. The last time, that voice had been filled with nothing but hatred. The last time, those eyes had looked at her as if she were a stranger. The last time, she had walked away in tears, carrying Leo in her arms, leaving everything behind. She took a shaky breath. And press call. The dial tone rang. Once, twice, 3 times. Each second was a knife twisting her chest. If he didn't pick up, if he refused to listen, if he abandoned Leo the way he had abandoned her a year ago. Click. He answered. The world stopped. Ronan. Her throat tightened. She hated the way her voice broke. Silence. No anger. No sharp, biting words. Just a heavy pause, as if he was waiting for her to break under the weight of what she had to say. She hated that. Hated how he always made her feel small. But now was not the time. She had to speak. Leo. She swallowed, trying to steady herself. Leo is in the hospital. She heard his breath hitch. 1 second. 2. Then his voice, low and sharp. What happened? No coldness. No mockery. Just pure, undeniable tension. Naomi squeezed her eyes shut, forcing herself to say the words she never thought she'd have to say to him. He needs a blood transfusion. The faint creak of a chair. The rustling of movement. Like he had just snapped upright. She pushed forward. My blood isn't a match, she whispered, her voice barely holding together. But yours is. A sharp, metallic click, the unmistakable sound of his grip tightening around the phone. Naomi could picture his expression. Jaw clenched, teeth grinding, fingers curled into fists, and maybe, just maybe, a flicker of hesitation in those cold blue eyes. Will he refuse? He could. He could tell her no, could walk away, could leave her to deal with this on her own. But if he did, if he was that heartless, if he let his own son die in a hospital bed, she would never forgive him. Never. Her grip on the phone tightened, and her voice came out like a final sentence. If you have even a shred of humanity left, save your son. The other end, silence. 1 second, 2, 3, the longest seconds of her life. Then, send me the hospital's address. She didn't have time to breathe, didn't have time to process. Her fingers moved on instinct, typing out the location, sending the message with trembling hands. A second later, her screen flashed with a notification. Message read, no questions, no hesitation, just one simple truth. Ronan Calloway was coming. Naomi stood frozen in the hospital corridor, her phone still clutched tightly in her hand, emotions crashing through her like a tidal wave. Not relief, not hope, but the cold, brutal reality of what was about to happen. For the first time in a year, she would have to face the man who had destroyed her life. And this time, she wouldn't let him break her. St. James Hospital. The fluorescent lights cast a pale, sterile glow over the endless white corridors. The sharp scent of antiseptic filled the air, blending with the hurried footsteps of nurses and the low murmur of doctors exchanging urgent updates. Naomi leaned against the wall, arms wrapped tightly around herself, as if that was the only thing keeping her from collapsing. She had been waiting for this moment. But now that it was here, she wasn't sure she was ready. Outside, a car screeched to a stop. Ronan stepped out, moving fast, faster than he could ever remember. He didn't think, didn't care about the company, didn't care about the headlines, didn't care about the war with Amelia Sterling. All he cared about was Leo. Golden curls, wide, bright eyes that used to light up when they saw him. Tiny hands clutching his fingers as if they never wanted to let go. The image seared through his mind, tightening in his chest like a vice. He moved faster. The glass doors slid open. The hospital blurred around him. None of it mattered, because the moment he stepped inside, he saw her. Naomi. She looked up the second he entered. She hadn't meant to gasp, hadn't meant for her heart to hammer so hard she could barely breathe, hadn't meant for his presence to still affect her like this. But as he walked through that door, as their eyes met for the first time in a year, she realized she had no control over any of it. Ronan stopped, not because he wanted to, but because, for a second, he couldn't move. Naomi Calloway stood before him, not the soft, gentle woman he once knew, not the wife who used to wait for him to come home with a smile. No, this was someone else entirely. She was thinner, but not weak. Her once long, silken hair had been cut short, grazing just below her chin, a silent, deliberate severance from the past. The warmth in her brown eyes was gone, replaced by an impenetrable wall of steel. And when she looked at him, there was no love, no pain, only ice-cold distance between them. Ronan's hands curled into fists. He didn't know what to say. 1 year apart, hundreds of unsaid words, thousands of unspoken emotions, all of it condensed into a single, suffocating silence. And then Naomi broke it. The emergency room is down the hall. Her voice was quiet, detached, like he was nothing more than a stranger. No greeting, no explanation, nothing to suggest that they had ever been anything to each other. Something twisted deep in Ronan's chest. But now wasn't the time to think about it. Not when Leo was waiting. He gave a sharp nod. Then, without another word, he walked past her, heading straight for the end of the corridor. He didn't look back, and neither did she. Still, Naomi felt it. Felt the weight of his presence as he brushed past her. Felt the warmth of his breath ghost against her skin. Felt the air shift, like something long buried was clawing its way back to the surface. She shut her eyes, forcing herself to steady her breathing. She had imagined this moment 100 times, but in all the versions she had played out in her head, she had never imagined it would hurt this much. The air in the hospital room was suffocating. The steady beeping of the monitor filled the silence, each rhythmic sound a painful reminder of the fragile life lying in that bed. Leo's shallow breaths blended with the soft hum of the Ford drip, the only signs of life in his small, pale body. Ronan stood at his son's bedside, staring down at the tiny face he hadn't seen in a year. The last time he had held Leo, he had been wrapped in a soft blanket, bright blue eyes wide with wonder. Tiny fingers reaching, searching for something, someone to hold on to. And when Ronan had offered his hand, Leo had grasped it so tightly, as if he would never let go. But now, that little hand lay limp, cold. Ronan's chest clenched painfully. He hadn't been here. He had missed everything. And now, all he could do was give his son his blood and hope it would be enough. Would it be enough? From the other side of the room, Naomi watched in silence. She didn't move, didn't speak, but Ronan could feel her presence behind him, her gaze like a weight pressing into his back. He took a slow, steadying breath and turned. And for the first time, they truly faced each other. No long corridors between them. No hurried footsteps pretending they were strangers. Just them, Naomi, Ronan, and the wreckage left between them. He spoke first. "Thank you." Naomi didn't react. Ronan's fingers curled slightly as he pressed on. "Thank you for calling me." Her brown eyes met his, dark and unreadable. "You don't have to thank me," she said, voice cool and detached. "I called for Leo." Ronan's chest tightened. Of course. She hadn't called for him. She had called for their son. He had known that. But hearing her say it still cut deeper than he expected. He exhaled slowly, forcing himself to say the words he hadn't had the courage to say in an entire year. "Naomi." For the first time, there was no coldness in his voice. No sharp edges. No fury. Only honesty and regret. "I was wrong." The room froze. Naomi didn't speak, but her fingers tensed against the bedsheet. Ronan held her gaze, his voice low but firm. each word a confession. I was wrong to throw you out without letting you explain. Wrong to let my emotions cloud my judgment. Wrong to believe what I saw without searching for the truth myself. His throat felt tight, but he pushed forward. I lost you. I lost Leo. He drew in a breath, forcing himself to steady his heartbeat. I want to make it right. Naomi blinked, not because she was moved, but because she couldn't believe what she had just heard. A year ago, Ronan hadn't given her a chance, hadn't needed an explanation. He had seen the photos, seen the bank records, and decided she was guilty. No questions, no doubt. And now, after a year of silence, he wanted to fix it? A bitter laugh escaped her lips. Not amusement, but something colder, something laced with disillusionment. You want to make it right? She repeated, as if the words meant nothing to her anymore. Ronan stayed silent. She took a step closer. You said you lost me? Her voice was quiet, but the edge in it was razor sharp. Ronan, you didn't lose me. You threw me away. His entire body stiffened. I begged you. Naomi continued, voice steady, but something fractured deep in her eyes. I told you I was innocent, and you didn't listen. She let out a slow, bitter exhale. Do you know what hurt the most? Ronan didn't answer. Not that you believed I cheated, she whispered, but that you never even questioned whether you might be wrong. The words hit like a knife straight through his chest. He had no defense, because she was right. The silence stretched between them, heavy with everything left unsaid. Ronan wanted to speak, wanted to explain, wanted to tell her he had been a fool, that he had been manipulated, that he should have fought for her instead of walking away. But there was something in Naomi's eyes that told him words wouldn't be enough. Naomi inhaled deeply, steadying herself. She didn't want to fight anymore, didn't want to argue, didn't want to waste another second thinking about Ronan Calloway. All she wanted was for Leo to survive. She turned away, her gaze falling on their son's fragile form. Go get tested, Ronan, she said, her voice unreadable. That's the only thing you can do for him right now. Ronan didn't move, because he knew, this time, he wouldn't be able to fix things with just words. He had to prove it. Ronan said nothing. He couldn't. Naomi had just shut the last door he thought he could walk through. He knew she was still hurting, still wounded, and worse, she no longer believed in him. Not even a little. There was no room for explanations, no space for apologies. Only the ice-cold distance between them and a fragile boy lying in that hospital bed, the last thread still tying them together. Ronan drew in a slow breath, forcing himself to turn away. Without another word, he walked out of the room, heading toward the lab for testing. He would save his son, but Naomi? He wasn't sure if there was anything left between them to save. Across the city, in the towering offices of Sterling Corporation, Amelia Sterling was watching. She took a slow sip of red wine, her sharp eyes skimming across the glowing screen in front of her. The headlines were already flooding the news cycle. Ronan Calloway spotted at St. James Hospital in the dead of night. Leo Calloway, son of billionaire Ronan Calloway, admitted in critical condition. Naomi Calloway makes first public appearance after a year, keeps distance from ex-husband. Amelia tilted her head, a faint, knowing smirk playing at her lips. So, Naomi has finally come out of hiding. She set her wine glass down, her fingers absently twirling the phone in her hand. A new message had just arrived. Anonymous number. I've been watching. They're at St. James. What do you want me to do? Amelia's lips curled. Slowly, deliberately, she typed out her reply. Not yet. I want to see where this goes first. She always knew when to strike and when to wait. And this time, she wasn't in a rush. She hadn't needed to hunt Naomi down. Naomi had walked back into the light all on her own. For a year, she had hidden, vanished from the press, kept her distance from Ronan, slipped out of Amelia's grasp. But for a single drop of blood, Naomi had been pulled back onto the board. A single mistake. And now, Naomi was in the game again. Amelia leaned back in her chair, her gaze drifting toward the floor-to-ceiling windows. Beyond the glass, across the glittering skyline, Calloway Tech stood tall, a monument of power, of pride, of everything Ronan had built over the years. A year ago, she had nearly destroyed Naomi. But toppling Ronan? That wasn't enough. She needed more. A bigger move. A perfect strike. And now, with Naomi's return, with Ronan dragged back into this mess, Amelia knew her moment had arrived. She lifted her phone again, this time dialing directly. Jonathan West, editor-in-chief of the Financial Tribune, the man who had helped her orchestrate Callaway Tech's financial scandal just last week. The line rang once, twice. Then, "Jonathan," she purred, her voice dripping with sugar. "I have an exclusive for you." There was a pause. Then Jonathan's voice came through, low and intrigued. "What is it this time?" Amelia's smirk widened, her eyes glinting with pure, calculated malice. Ronan Callaway's family. Naomi never thought she'd be in the same car as Ronan again. Not after everything that had happened. Not after all the scars he had left behind. And yet, here she was, sitting in the back seat of a sleek black SUV, holding Leo tightly in her arms, while Ronan sat in the front, his hands gripping the steering wheel. Rain drizzled softly against the windows. Streetlights flickered past, casting fleeting shadows across his face. She didn't want to look, didn't want to remember, didn't want to let herself waver. She couldn't trust him. Not now, maybe not ever. 1 hour ago, St. James Hospital. Ronan stood in the dimly lit corridor, a faint strip of medical tape still clinging to his arm where they had drawn his blood. The transfusion had been a success. Leo was stable, but the doctor had been clear. He needed rest, a quiet place, somewhere safe. And the hospital was no longer safe. The media had caught wind of the story. Outside, cameras flashed relentlessly. Social media was already exploding with headlines. Ronan Callaway's son hospitalized amid corporate scandal. Naomi Callaway resurfaces. Has the controversy truly ended? Is Leo Callaway suffering from serious illness? A hidden truth unfolds. Ronan clenched his jaw. He knew exactly who was pulling the strings behind this. Amelia. He couldn't leave Naomi and Leo here any longer. "You have to come with me." Naomi froze. She stared at him as if he had just said the most impossible thing. She didn't trust him. She didn't want to go with him. But then, she looked down at Leo, at his tiny frame, still so fragile, his breaths too weak. And she knew she had no choice. She hated that she still had to rely on Ronan. But for Leo, she gave a stiff nod. Reluctant, but silent. Ronan understood, and he didn't say another word. Now, on the road, leaving the city, the SUV sliced through the empty streets, moving swiftly toward the outskirts of town. Naomi stared out the window, her arms wrapped protectively around Leo, feeling every shallow rise and fall of his breath. She didn't ask where Ronan was taking them. She didn't want to ask. All that mattered was Leo. And yet, every time she caught a glimpse of Ronan in the rearview mirror, every time their eyes met for the briefest second, something inside her wavered. No, you can't trust him again. She squeezed her eyes shut, holding Leo closer. As long as her son was safe, she didn't need anyone else. She didn't need Ronan. Not now. Not ever. The story is far from over. Can Naomi ever trust Ronan again? What twisted moves will Amelia make next? And Ronan, has he truly changed? Subscribe and follow now to stay ahead of the storm, because the truth is still waiting to be uncovered. The battle isn't over yet. The mansion on the outskirts lay shrouded in silent darkness. Leo was asleep, his tiny breasts warm against Naomi's shoulder as she held him close. She sat on a long sofa, her eyes wide open, staring out the window. Even out here, far from the city, far from the relentless cameras and the media's ruthless hunt, she didn't feel safe. The feeling of being chased clung to her like a shadow that refused to disappear. She knew this wasn't over, and Ronan knew it too. He stood on the porch, gripping his phone tightly, his eyes locked on the screen. Before him was a flood of headlines about Callaway Tech's crisis. The financial fraud Amelia had orchestrated was shaking his company to its core. Stock prices plummeting, shareholders panicking, the board showing signs of turning against him, ready to push him out as CEO. But none of that mattered more than one thing. The truth. He needed proof. Something that would bring Amelia down completely. And that was when his phone buzzed. A name flashed across the screen. A name he never expected to see at this moment. Oliver Hayes. 30 minutes later, a secret meeting. The living room door swung open. Oliver stepped in, tension carved into his face. A USB drive rested in his palm, the laptop screen casting a cold glow over his sharp features. "What did you find?" Ronan demanded. Oliver didn't answer. He plugged the USB into the laptop, and instantly, a barrage of encrypted data, emails, and financial reports filled the screen. He took a deep breath, then met Ronan's gaze. "I have proof." Ronan narrowed his eyes. "What proof?" Oliver turned the screen toward him. Emails flooded the display. Sender, Amelia Sterling. Recipients, a network of hackers. Media outlets, the Callaway Tech Board. Ronan's heartbeat slammed against his ribs. His eyes scanned the words. Amelia's direct orders to fabricate evidence against Naomi. Her exchanges with a hacker to alter timestamps in the photos of Naomi and Oliver. Tampered bank statements to forge false transactions. Her secret offers to board members to manipulate the vote that would strip Ronan of his position. Everything was here. Everything Ronan should have seen long ago. Everything he had been blind to. The raw, bitter truth stared back at him. Naomi had never betrayed him. It had all been a perfectly executed scheme, crafted by Amelia Sterling. Naomi stood at the doorway, her heartbeat pounding in her ears. She couldn't hear every word of their conversation, but Ronan's expression said it all. His eyes were fixed on the screen, his jaw locked so tightly it looked like it might shatter. His gaze darkened, a storm brewing behind it. His fingers curled into a fist, knuckles turning white. She had seen this look before he destroyed her. But this time, it wasn't directed at her. It was aimed at the one who truly deserved to be ruined. Oliver's voice cut through the silence, low and steady. "We can use this to take her down." Ronan didn't answer. Only a cold, seething rage stirred within him. Not reckless, not uncontrollable, but sharp, unyielding. He stood abruptly, pulled out his phone, and dialed. After 2 rings, a familiar voice answered. "What's up?" Kane, the hacker he had hired before. "Can you release a massive data drop to the public within 24 hours? Ronan asked. A quiet chuckle. "You already know the answer to that, Callaway." Ronan's eyes stayed locked on the screen. Amelia's emails burned bright in front of him. This time, he wouldn't make the same mistake. This time, he would be the one to end it. The top floor of Sterling Enterprises was bathed in city lights. Beneath the gleaming glass tower, New York pulsed with life, oblivious to the storm about to strike. Amelia Sterling sat in her high-end leather chair, legs crossed, fingers gliding idly along the rim of her wine glass as the computer screen before her flickered with constant news updates. The chaos at Callaway Tech was spiraling. The board was preparing to vote Ronan out. Stocks were plummeting. The media was digging deeper into the financial scandal. Everything was going according to plan, or at least that's what she thought. The door burst open, and the moment Amelia looked up, she realized her first mistake. Ronan Callaway had arrived. He walked in unannounced. No secretary stopping him, no security dragging him away. Just the icy blue of his gaze locking onto hers, devoid of patience, devoid of mercy. She set her glass down and arched a brow. "You got here faster than I expected, Ronan." Her voice remained calm, as if he were nothing more than an uninvited guest she had anticipated all along. But Ronan no longer had time for her games. He slammed a USB drive onto the table. Amelia glanced at it, then back at him, unfazed. "And what's this?" "Evidence." His voice was blade sharp. "Every single thing you've done. Every lie you spun to destroy Naomi. To manipulate me. To buy out the board. Did you really think you wouldn't get exposed?" Amelia laughed. Not the laugh of someone who had lost, but the laugh of someone who still held the upper hand. "Is that so?" She rose to her feet, taking slow, deliberate steps toward him, her heels clicking against the marble floor. "You could ruin me, Ronan." She stopped inches away, tilting her chin up, meeting his gaze without a hint of fear. "But if you do," her voice dropped, smooth as poison, "you'll lose everything too." Ronan didn't waver. Not like a year ago, when he had let her words dictate his actions. Not like before, when he had let his emotions cloud his judgment. Now he saw through her. I have nothing left to lose, Amelia. For a fleeting second, something darkened in her eyes, but she recovered quickly, her lips curving into a knowing smirk. Is that so? She tilted her head, circling back to her desk with slow, calculated grace. You say that, but I think you still have plenty to lose. She picked up a remote from the desk, pressing a single button. The massive screen behind her flickered to life, and on it, Naomi and Leo. Ronan went still. The footage showed Naomi stepping into a safe house, Leo cradled in her arms, exhaustion evident on her face. But they weren't alone. Outside the building, a figure lingered. A black car parked across the street. A trap. Amelia knew. She had been watching. Ronan's hands curled into fists, his voice dropping into something dangerously low. What have you done, Amelia? She shrugged, sipping her wine as if they were discussing the weather. Nothing. Yet. She set the glass down, tilting her head. But you know how the world works, don't you? Her smile was a blade. A woman branded as an adulteress suddenly vanishes with the son of Callaway Tech CEO in the middle of a financial scandal. You think the press won't come for her? Ronan's entire body coiled, fury clawing at his chest. Amelia took a slow step toward him, her voice dropping to a whisper only he could hear. You want to release that evidence? Go ahead. But if you do, I guarantee. Her smile turned razor sharp. Naomi and Leo will never know peace again. A storm howled in Ronan's chest. He wanted to end this now, to wipe that smirk off her face, to destroy her the way she had tried to destroy Naomi. But he couldn't risk it. He wouldn't let Naomi and Leo become collateral damage. He had to do this right. Slow, precise, merciless. He inhaled deeply, his voice unervingly calm. You made a mistake, Amelia. She lifted a brow, intrigued. Oh, do tell. Ronan stepped closer, lowering his voice to a deadly whisper. Your mistake was thinking I'd play by your rules. For the first time, something flickered in her gaze, caution. But before she could react, Ronan pressed a button on his phone. A message sent. Amelia snatched her own phone, the screen lighting up with a breaking news alert. Evidence of Amelia Sterling's corporate fraud leaked across all major media outlets. Her face paled. Ronan smirked. Good luck, Amelia. New York, the next morning. The media storm exploded across every headline, flooding news sites, television broadcasts, and social media. Amelia Sterling, CEO of Sterling Enterprises, accused of media manipulation and data fraud. Shocking evidence. Amelia Sterling deliberately destroyed Naomi Callaway's reputation and rigged Callaway Tech's board. Callaway Tech in crisis. Ronan Callaway faces removal from his own company. Police involved. Could Amelia Sterling be facing prison time? Sterling Enterprises, 8 a.m. The glass doors of Sterling Enterprises burst open as a team of officers stormed in, sending employees into stunned silence. Inside the executive office, Amelia Sterling struggled to maintain her composure, but her hands had already clenched into fists, nails digging into her palms. She couldn't believe it. Couldn't believe she had lost. Couldn't believe Ronan had played a perfect move against her. The traders on the board had turned their backs on her the moment the evidence went public. The companies that once stood by her had begun pulling their investments. In one single night, she had gone from the queen of the tech world to a woman staring down an arrest warrant. The lead officer stepped into the room, holding up an official warrant, his gaze sharp as a blade. Amelia Sterling, you are under arrest for evidence tampering, media manipulation, and financial fraud. Her jaw tightened as she drew in a slow breath. But as the cuffs snapped around her wrists, her face remained unreadable. No fear, only a flicker of something dangerous. She knew she had lost this round. But the game? The game wasn't over. Tilting her head, she let a slow, knowing smirk cross her lips. You won this battle, Ronan. Her voice was quiet, sharp as a knife's edge. But you're about to lose everything. And with that, she was led away. Callaway Tech Headquarters, 10:30 a.m. An emergency board meeting convened just hours after Amelia's arrest. Ronan stood at the center of the room, facing 12 men and women who had once supported him. But today, they no longer stood by his side. One board member lifted a document, his voice measured but cold. "Ronan, no one denies what you've done. You took down Amelia Sterling. You proved you were manipulated." Another member spoke up. "But this company is in the middle of a storm. Stocks are crashing. Investors are panicking. And most importantly, we need a stable CEO to pull Callaway Tech out of this crisis." Ronan already knew what was coming. Still, when the final words fell, his chest tightened. "We've held a private vote. Ronan, we need you to resign." A suffocating silence filled the room. No one dared meet his eyes. These people, the ones he had built up, trusted, protected, were now betraying him to save themselves. Ronan didn't lash out. He didn't argue. He just let out a quiet, humorless laugh. A cold, hollow sound. "You're pushing me out of the company I built from the ground up?" His voice was low, dangerous. No one answered. Then, the chairman cleared his throat. "The decision has been made." The official termination papers slid across the table toward him. Ronan stared at them, his fingers curling around the edge, knuckles turning white. A year ago, when Naomi walked away, he lost his family. Now, he had lost his empire. He had won against Amelia. But the cost? Everything he ever had. 15 minutes later, Ronan stepped out of Callaway Tech's headquarters, a single briefcase heavy in his grip. The press was waiting. Flashbulbs exploded. "Ronan Callaway, do you have any comments on your resignation? Do you regret your decisions? Will you fight to take back Callaway Tech?" He didn't answer. He just walked, one step at a time, away from the place he once thought was his entire world. And for the first time in his life, he had no idea where to go next. New York woke to a gray, somber morning. There was no rain, but thick, heavy clouds loomed over the city, casting shadows over the towering skyscrapers, like a curtain of gloom draped across the skyline. Much like the weight in Ronan's chest, he stood on the sidewalk across the street, his eyes locked on the small apartment where Naomi and Leo were staying. His hands clenched at his sides, faint bruises still marking his knuckles from where he had slammed his fists against his desk in frustration the night before. Not because of the board's betrayal, not because he had lost his company, but because he had finally realized that he had destroyed the only things that had ever truly mattered. Naomi's apartment. Naomi stood by the window, gazing down at the quiet street below. She knew he was there. He had arrived an hour ago, yet he hadn't moved. As if he were waiting, as if he were wrestling with himself, as if he wasn't sure if he had the right to knock on her door anymore. Naomi took a deep breath, closing her eyes. She hated this feeling, hated the way her heart still raced whenever Ronan was near, hated the way she still wondered if he was okay. But more than anything, she hated facing him, because she knew the truth hadn't changed. He had doubted her, destroyed her, cast her out of his life without ever giving her a chance to prove her innocence. She had endured hell for an entire year. And now, just because he had realized his mistake, just because he wanted to make things right, was she supposed to forgive him? No, not that easily. A knock on the door. Naomi's lips pressed into a tight line. She didn't have to check the peephole to know who it was. Taking another steady breath, she opened the door. Ronan stood there. He looked different. Gone was the sharp, immaculate suit. Gone was the powerful presence of a billionaire CEO. What stood before her now was simply a man who had lost everything. A man standing in front of the only woman he had ever loved. The same woman he had single-handedly destroyed. "Naomi," he said, his voice hoarse. She didn't respond immediately. She only looked at him. A year ago, if he had shown up like this, if he had looked at her with regret instead of anger, she might not have been able to hold back her tears. But now, she had run out of tears a long time ago. She folded her arms across her chest, her voice calm, too calm. "What do you want, Ronan?" He exhaled, as if summoning every last ounce of courage. "I need to talk to you." Naomi let out a quiet laugh. Not amused, cold, bitter. "Now you want to talk?" Ronan's fists tightened at his sides. "I know I was wrong. I hurt you. I made you go through something you never should have had to endure." His voice dropped lower, his blue eyes fierce yet raw with honesty. "But I'm not here to ask for your forgiveness." Naomi's gaze sharpened. "Then why are you here?" Ronan swallowed, his eyes never leaving hers. Because I need you to know I was wrong, and I will never make that mistake again. Naomi didn't flinch. She wasn't the woman she had been a year ago. She had survived without Ronan, and she wouldn't fall just because of a late apology. She stepped closer, closing the distance between them to a single breath. And then she said, "You let your doubt destroy us once." Her voice was steel, but deep in her eyes, there was still a flicker of something broken. "Don't think an apology can fix that." Ronan went still. He had known this would be her answer. But hearing it from her lips still cut deeper than any knife. He wanted to beg, wanted to tell her he would do anything to make it right. But Naomi didn't give him a chance. She simply stepped back, her gaze never wavering. "Now, please leave." The door closed. Ronan remained where he was. His chest tightened, not with anger, but with the weight of the pain he had inflicted now turning against him. He had lost her, maybe forever. He took a slow, shuddering breath before turning away, not saying another word, because this time he knew he couldn't force Naomi to forgive him. She had to choose to. If there was still one last chance left for them, it had to come from her, not from him. The door closed behind Ronan. He stood there, alone in the empty hallway, staring at the wooden door as if he could still hear Naomi's voice echoing in his mind. "You let your doubt destroy us once. Don't think an apology can fix that." The words were a blade, sharp and precise, cutting deep into his chest, leaving behind a hollow, suffocating ache. She was right. An apology couldn't fix everything. He never expected forgiveness. Not after what he had done. He turned away. Every step he took felt like a strike against his pride, a relentless reminder of all he had lost. His company, his reputation, his family. But none of those losses hurt as much as losing Naomi, because no matter how much power, wealth, or influence he had, none of it meant anything without her. And now, he had realized it too late. As he stepped outside, a cold breeze swept through the stairwell. He pulled his coat tighter, not because of the cold, but because of the unfamiliar sensation creeping into his chest. A strange, weightless feeling. Freedom. For the first time in his life, he was unbound. No company to run. No endless board meetings. No burden of maintaining the image of the untouchable CEO. He had lost everything, but at the same time, he had nothing left to fear. He had hit rock bottom, and when a man reaches the bottom, the only thing left to do is rise again. New York City. Ronan stepped onto the sidewalk, the glow of the city lights washing over him. No bodyguards at his side. No sleek black car waiting to pick him up. No admiring glances from employees. No relentless calls from board members. Just a man, alone, amidst the pulsing heartbeat of the city. And oddly enough, he wasn't afraid. A small bar on the corner. Ronan pushed open the door and slid into a dimly lit booth, ordering a whiskey. The bartender placed a drink in front of him without a second glance. A week ago, his face had been plastered across financial magazines. But now, he was just another nameless stranger. And for the first time in a long time, that thought didn't suffocate him. It relieved him. He took a slow sip, letting the burn slide down his throat. His eyes drifted to the phone on the table. No missed calls. No messages from Naomi. She had truly shut that door. He set the phone down, not checking again. For the first time in a year, he let himself let go. No fighting. No chasing redemption. Just accepting the consequences. Because if there was one thing he had learned, some mistakes can't be fixed overnight. Some wounds need time. And if there was ever a chance to earn back Naomi's trust, he would have to be patient, to wait, to prove himself, not through words, but through action. Ronan set the glass down, exhaling. He had no idea what the future held. Didn't know what he would do tomorrow, where he would go, where he would even begin again. But one thing he knew for sure. He would never make the same mistake twice. 1 month later, New York shifted seasons, the first whispers of winter curling through the city streets. The crisp autumn air carried the scent of fallen leaves, golden and rust-colored, scattering across the pavement like a painter's careless brushstrokes. Naomi pulled her coat tighter around her, reaching down to adjust the tiny knit cap on Leo's head. Are you cold, sweetheart? Leo giggled, his little fingers clutching hers tightly. No. His voice was bright, his laughter pure, like he had never known pain, like the world was nothing but joy. Naomi smiled, but the weight in her chest never fully lifted. She had spent the last month trying to piece her life back together, trying to forget Ronan, trying to build a life that was just her and Leo. But no matter how hard she tried, there was one truth she couldn't change. Leo still missed his father. The park. Laughter rang through the crisp morning air, blending with the chatter of couples strolling by and the rhythmic footsteps of joggers on the gravel paths. Naomi sat on a bench near the playground, watching as Leo ran across the grass, his toy car clutched tightly in his hands. He loved it here. He laughed as he chased after the other children, climbed up the slide, and tumbled down with reckless delight. She watched him, warmth swelling in her chest, until she turned her head and froze. Ronan stood a short distance away, dressed in a dark sweater and jeans. He looked nothing like the powerful CEO he had once been. No bodyguards, no expensive suits, no impenetrable mask of indifference. Just a man standing quietly, watching his son. Naomi clenched her fists. She knew he had been keeping his distance, not in a way that frightened her, but in a way that waited. He hadn't called, hadn't texted, hadn't tried to force his way back into her life. And yet, he was still here. Not for her, for Leo. Naomi forced herself to look away. But before she could, Leo came bounding toward her, his tiny feet kicking up leaves as he ran. "Mommy, mommy," he called, breathless with excitement, until suddenly he stopped. His gaze shifted. Naomi's stomach twisted. Leo was looking right at Ronan. The same bright blue eyes. Asterisk, asterisk, his father's eyes. Asterisk, asterisk, widening with curiosity. And then, like it was the most natural thing in the world, "Daddy!" The world stopped. Naomi's breath caught. Ronan froze. And Leo, oblivious to the storm brewing between the two adults, only looked at Ronan with wide-eyed wonder. For a man who had been called many names, CEO, Mr. Calloway, Sir, nothing had ever sounded like this. "Daddy," Ronan felt his throat tighten. He turned to Naomi, searching for permission, but she said nothing. She only stood there, her expression an unreadable mix of emotions too tangled to unravel. Ronan exhaled, then slowly knelt down to Leo's level. He didn't reach for him, didn't pull him into his arms. He only held out his hand. "Hey, Leo." His voice was warm, gentle in a way Naomi had never heard before. Leo hesitated for a moment, his tiny lips pursing in thought. And then, he reached out, his small fingers wrapped around Ronan's hand, a bright, toothy grin breaking across his face. Ronan felt something inside him shatter and rebuild all at once. It didn't matter if Naomi forgave him. It didn't matter if he had lost everything else. As long as Leo still accepted him, that was enough. Naomi inhaled sharply, turning away before the tears in her eyes could fall. She had thought she was strong, had thought she had moved on. But seeing Leo call Ronan daddy, seeing Ronan look at their son with a tenderness so raw, unraveled something inside her. She realized something she had been too afraid to admit. She had never truly stopped loving him. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting Central Park in a blaze of amber and gold. Leo was still laughing, his tiny fingers wrapped around Ronan's hand, tugging him along as they wandered through the park. A year of separation, a year of missed moments, and yet there was no distance between them. Watching Ronan kneel down, listening intently to every little word Leo said, carefully wiping a smudge off the boy's cheek, Naomi couldn't deny the truth. He was a good father, and maybe, just maybe, he could still be something in her life, too. They stopped near a bench by the lake. Leo, exhausted from an afternoon of play, leaned into Naomi's embrace, his eyelids fluttering. Ronan stood just a few steps away. Naomi drew in a deep breath. She had thought the wounds he left would never fade. But today, watching him stand there, quietly, expectantly, not demanding, not trying to fix everything with empty promises, she realized she had been waiting for this. Not an apology, not declarations of love, but a man who had truly changed. A man who had been willing to be patient, to take responsibility, to lose everything to bring the truth to light. Ronan met her gaze. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He didn't beg. He didn't push. He simply waited. Naomi held his stare for a long moment, then slowly looked down. She wasn't sure if she was ready to forgive, but she was ready to try. She reached out her hand. Ronan didn't hesitate. His fingers closed around hers. No words were spoken. No promises were made. Only a single, silent moment, where the past, present, and future converged. There were still uncertainties. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but one thing was certain. They had found their way back to each other. As the last rays of sunlight faded, Ronan and Naomi's hands remained clasped, not as a rushed reconciliation, but as a beginning. Truth will ultimately prevail where there is pains to bring it to light. George Washington. Ronan had lost everything. His company, his reputation, his power. But he had never abandoned the truth. And that was what led him back to where he truly belonged. Not in a glass-walled empire, but here, with the only people who ever mattered. Thank you for being part of this journey. We hope Ronan and Naomi's story has taken you through love, loss, and above all, forgiveness. What do you think of this ending? Should Naomi forgive Ronan completely? Do they deserve a second chance? Leave your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow for more stories, because every tale carries a lesson worth exploring. Subscribe now to catch the next chapter in our storytelling universe. See you in the next story.